Hi, I'm Lance Hendricks, and you're watching Brian Lomax's Movie Talk.
Hello, everybody. It is the Lawn Gnome, and welcome to joining us today for one of what I'm hoping of many reoccurring live shows. Today, I am here with a good friend of mine over here on YouTube, Brian Lomax from Brian Lomax Movie Talk. And today, we are going to be talking about one of our many passions that we share, and that is our enjoyment of the Bruce Timm DC Animated Universe DVD films. So, of course, Brian, welcome. Thank you for joining me today for this little adventure that we're going to be having.
No worries. Good to be here.
Great. I mean, I couldn't have asked for a better person to join me on this one. And of course, feel free to give us comments. Feel free to give us feedback. And if you have any input out there who is watching us today that would like to let us know a couple things that we may have missed, you're more than welcome to let us know in the comments section. I don't know if we'll be able to get around to answering everybody's comments, but we're just happy to have you all here. So what I like to do is when it comes to films is split them up into groups. I like to call them books, if you will. And that's because of the fact that I find a connector with a certain group of films as the line of films progresses. So this grouping today is going to be of 6 films, and it's going to be because of the fact that they were the first of over 20 that we have now. But before we get into analyzing and discussing what we love, what we don't love, and highlights of each of these films, I just wanted to ask you, Brian, what got you to discover, because I know that you've been a fan of Batman particularly for many, many years, but how did you find the wonder that is Bruce Timm and his amazing line of animated series and films?
Well, basically, like you say, I'm a huge Batman nut. Batman Returns, 1992. I was just by the time that film had come out, I was just absolutely crazy about Batman. And then obviously, Batman animated series kind of kicked off, and I thought that was like when it first came out as a young boy. I kind of thought it was meant to kind of exist within the world that Tim Burton had created, primarily because of Shirley Walker's reworking of the Danny Elfman score at the beginning. But then obviously I realized actually this is anything but. This is its own thing, and a really faithful adaptation of the comic book. So I was just absolutely hooked at that point on that series, on anything that span off from that series, because obviously Bruce Timm would go on to give us the Superman animated series, then Justice League and Justice League Unlimited, which were all really top notch.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
we got out of the Batman animated series this theatrical release, or at least it was in America. I don't think it actually did get a theatrical release over here, but it was Batman Mask of the Phantasm, which it just blew me away, and it's still one of my favorite animated movies of all time. It doesn't feel like a story that is made for TV. It feels like a big, proper kind of movie story. It's very adult, very kind of mature, I think. So yeah, that kind of just really cemented the fact that these would work as movies, not just TV episodes. They would work as movies. And so then, I picked up all the animated movies that followed, that kind of spun off from that, right up until Batman Return of the Joker. And then it just kind of seemed to die after that. It seemed to, like, certainly over in the UK, because we never got like the TV series like Young Justice and all them lot. So it was a bit of a lull over here, a bit of a quiet period. And then I remember reading a comic book, and there was an advertisement in the comic book for Superman Doomsday, the animated feature. And I'm like, that was literally like the first I'd heard of it. And I'm like, what the hell's this? They're adapting Superman Doomsday. They're adapting like the biggest Superman story of the past 10 years, at that point it had been. And I'm like, I was proper freaking out. So I'm like, where can I get a copy of this film? So I looked it up, found a release date and then that was it. I was just super excited for it. And then on the day it came out over here, I just got it on DVD. And then obviously since then, we've just had, well, like nearly 30. We're getting close to 30 now of these DC animated original movies. And I love them. Some to a lesser extent than others, but for the most part, yeah, really like them.
Well, you see, it's a diatribe like that that makes me very happy that I chose the right man to join me for this panel today. So my story basically, I had been introduced to these classic, iconic superheroes as a very young kid, dating all the way back to the Super Friends stories of the Hanna-Barbera cartoons, as well as the Adam West Burt Ward show. And ironically, today was a perfect day to have this first episode air because in about a week, we're going to be getting the DVD release of the brand new animated line from Warner Brothers, which starts to feature Batman, The Return of the Caped Crusaders, which I'm really excited to watch and review someday. But I discovered Batman the Animated Series when they first started talking about it in the United States, and the advertising and the news articles were everywhere. Like, everybody was saying, this is going to be huge. And I didn't get on the bandwagon right away because I was, at that time, more of a Marvel fan, and my favorite thing was the X-Men animated series. But every now and again, I would watch a Batman animated series episode and really just get mesmerized by the fact that, this is supposed to be a show for children. It had such an appeal for everyone, from people who watched the 1940 serials to people who adore the Batman Tim Burton films at the time. So, there was something really special here. And I got into it much more religiously when people told me that Mark Hamill was voicing the Joker. That was what sold me. And that was how I really appreciated it. Really, really did. And, all the other shows came to be. I was a big fan of Superman, the animated series, and I loved Batman Beyond because of how it was their original thing, and that was something that Bruce Timm's group was known for. I mean, they turned Harley Quinn, a non-comic book character, into her own comic book character and one of the most popular villainesses in comic book history, just because she was this one little cartoon character on a Batman cartoon for kids.
Yeah.
And, it just, so many great shows just came one after the other, and I just loved how he really created an entire animated universe. And that will lead in to a little bit more of a backstory. And obviously, we mentioned Batman Mask of the Phantasm, which came out in 1993 as Bruce Timm and company's first attempt at bringing their animation to the big screen. And I agree with you. It's one of the best Batman films in history, as far as I'm concerned. At one point in time, I thought that it was the best one.
I still do.
But because of the poor marketing, it didn't do well in the box office. And then Bruce Timm decided not to do the big screen again until, ironically, very recently with these one-night-only special premieres, which we'll discuss at some point in time in the future. Maybe not tonight. But either way, he continued to make these animated films, but they were direct-to-home video projects like Batman Sub-Zero, which a lot of people have enjoyed over the years. And there was also the mystery of the Batwoman. But probably the one that stuck out there was Batman Beyond: Return of the Joker, because one, you bring Mark Hamill's Joker into this brand new futuristic world that Bruce Timm and his group created. And the part that really stuck out was the fact that there was a PG version, but then there was a PG-13 version. So I was like, really? We're going to be seeing something that may not be necessarily something for kids. And it's not extremely violent or anything like that, but it has some very deep, complex story points, which I truthfully Was happy about.
It's very psychologically dark. That's the thing. And that's the thing with the Batman animated series, is that it actually credits the audience with intelligence. Like if you look at a lot of the Marvel stuff that was around when Batman the animated series came out, like the Spider-Man show that was out, and like you said, the X-Men. It
Mhm.
was the thing with animation back then is I found that characters tended to narrate to you, the audience, what they were doing. And it's like, I can see what you're doing. I don't need you to narrate it to me. And it's this whole thing of like, show, don't tell. And what Bruce Timm did with Batman the Animated Series, he worked on that rule, which is show, don't tell. Whereas stuff like X-Men, Spider-Man, it was telling you all this information, splurging it out all the time through the characters. So it worked like a movie, like in the way that adult programming works, and it told stories about people who had psychological issues. Now, I always remember, in particular, the two-part episode on Two Face's origin,
Yes. Yes,
and
that's a great episode.
dealing with this guy who's got this split personality, and not kind of glossing over it in some kind of 60s comic book kind of way, where he's just a megalomaniacal villain, like, but really going deep into this scarred psyche and how it affected his relationship with his wife and how it affected his relationship with Bruce, obviously Batman's alter ego kind of thing. And it's just, yeah, it was really deep, really psychologically dark, and just very mature. It felt to me like it was audience with intelligence, and that's what the movie does, and that's certainly what Batman Return of the Joker does. It's still one of the best animated movies featuring Batman.
Yeah. And even with Superman the Animated Series, which is supposed to be a lot more of a lighthearted atmosphere than Batman the Animated Series was, when you get to the last season and you see the episodes where Darkseid comes into the picture and he
Mm-hmm.
really starts to screw with Superman's mind, and Superman suddenly just starts fighting on emotion alone, like you just see a whole dimension that you never. I thought that some of those scenes, especially in those third season episodes, I really couldn't believe that they got away with showing it to a young audience, because Superman was psychologically affected by Darkseid's actions, and that was what really made that show one of Bruce Timm's most underrated, I think. I don't really think many people talk much about Superman as they do with Batman or Justice League or even Young Justice. I really think that that was a fantastic thing to add to the show. But after Batman Return of the Joker, then we saw them take another direction, and they made this direct-to-DVD film called Brainiac Attacks. And it was a Superman, yeah, and it was a Superman story, and everybody was excited to see Tim Daly come back and voice Superman. But the problem with that was they screwed around with the voices, and they gave all of these different characters that we were accustomed to different voices. And not only that, a lot of people thought that the movie was just flat out awful. So when Superman Doomsday was announced, I was very, very skeptical, regardless of the fact that it was given that PG-13 rating. I pretty much had no interest in seeing it. So obviously, we're going to start talking about the first of all the films, Superman Doomsday, which of course is based on the story in comic book history that shocked the world in the early 90s, and that, of course, is the death of Superman. And of course, he perished at the hands of Doomsday. Just in case you all are not comic book readers, that is exactly what happened. So this was their attempt at taking this landmark story and putting it onto a 90-minute film. And like I said, I had no interest in it at all. But all of a sudden, I get a call from one of my friends one day. And he says, "Do you want to come over and watch this amazing movie?" And he said, "Have you seen or heard about Superman Doomsday?" I said, "Yeah, I was not interested in seeing this movie at all." He says, "You are missing out. You have to see this movie." And I got around to watching it, and I got to tell you, this was definitely like the Batman the Animated Series that came before it. This was the start of something big.
Yeah, it's a very good kind of. I mean, because this isn't just Doomsday storyline that they're adapting here. It's the Reign of the Supermen storyline as well. They've got all of the, like 2 years worth of comic book storylines that they're trying to condense down into this, 76-minute movie. And a lot of people, it did kind of upset quite a few people, I think. A lot of people were very critical of it. But the fact of the matter is, you are going to lose something. You have to. And I think to adapt the story the way they did a really good job of keeping the spirit of the story in much the same way that Christopher Nolan did when he did The Dark Knight Rises. And he essentially adapted the Nightfall storyline and, completely changed it, really. But the spirit of that story is in that film. You can see so many elements of it. The breaking out of the inmates from Arkham, Bane's origin, and it's still Nightfall, but it isn't. And that's how I feel about this film. It's still the Doomsday storyline. It's still the Reign of the Superman storyline, but it isn't. It's its own thing, and that's kind of one of its strengths as much as one of its weaknesses, I feel.
Well, yeah, I totally agree with you there. I mean, just in case no one ever read the comics, and I'm sure that a lot of you out there who are watching may have never had intentions of picking up these comic books. I mean, you don't have to, but basically, just to give you guys an understanding, after the whole death of Superman, there was, as Brian said, the Reign of the Superman, where all of a sudden there are 4 completely different Supermen claiming that they are Superman. But who is the real one? We don't know. That was the whole mystery of these 4 mysterious people who were now suddenly wearing the famous S. And as the story progressed, we started to peel back the layers of each and every one of these individual Supermen and really see who these were. And eventually, it turns out that the real Superman is neither, and he comes back. That's basically the death of Superman story with the Reign of the Superman and the return of Superman. So that's a very complex story.
But the difference is, you see, is that by condensing that element down to this one Superman, so we get this imposter, well, a clone. We get this clone Superman in Superman Doomsday, the film version. What it does is it makes the story more intimate, I think. It makes the story more focused, because what you get from the comic book version, there's kind of a feeling there that actually there was a desperate attempt to set up a whole bunch of these new comic book titles. Steel, Superboy came out of it. And like, you don't get that with this, because it's, I don't know, just to me, it seems like it makes the story more focused by actually condensing those guys down into this one Superman imposter, and having him fight Superman, obviously, the real Superman, and doing away with Mongol, doing away with Cyborg. It's very trimmed. It's a very trimmed version of the comic book source material, but possibly better as a result, I think.
Right. And and the same thing as you said, with all these 4 Supermen put together as one Superman in this film, they still managed to throw in a couple of elements that made the other Supermen, which I really, really appreciated. And the other interesting thing about this specific film is there's one element in this film that has no presence at all in the comics, and that is the hand of Lex Luthor. And I love Lex Luthor's role in this story. It's probably one of the darkest interpretations of Lex Luthor, and bear with me here, I think probably the creepiest. Because there's a scene that my friends and I who love this movie, we constantly talk about it. It's when he is just like angry at the clone, and he just face and puts it right in front of him and says, "Why did you leave me? Why?" It's like, when you look at him, it's like, this is a sick relationship that Lex Luthor and Superman really have deep down, like, you could see a little bit of an obsession towards Superman through him.
Well, he has always wanted to be the one who takes down Superman, and I to me, I personally felt like that scene was overdoing it a little bit. I do like the element. I do like what they do with Lex Luthor here. His obsessive nature definitely comes out throughout this film, and that desire to be the one who proves to the world that he's the most superior because he's the one who took down Superman. There's a line in there about how Doomsday kind of took down Superman, and Lex Luthor's he's really angry at Doomsday because he's like, some creature that we've never even heard of before comes along and pounds him into oblivion like out of nowhere, and that really, it pisses him off. He can't stand that. It really gets to him because he's been playing all these games with Superman for so long that he could only envision himself as being the one who would ever take him down. One of the criticisms I have with the end of the film is when they take out the imposter. They shoot this kryptonite gas pellet thing, and it explodes, and he sucks it all in, and it apparently kills him. My only criticism with that is that, I don't know, I guess it's kryptonite in general. It becomes one of them conveniences that they use for story, in which when they need it to take down Superman like that, then it can do. And when they don't, miraculously Superman is able to kind of, it's not quite enough kryptonite to do him over or whatever. And it's like, when you look at all the different variations of Superman, whether it be in Smallville, whether it be in the movies or the comic books, it's kind of hard to grasp the impact that kryptonite really has on him because it's so differential. And that kind of annoys me. So, like, I didn't really buy that this imposter Superman, or the clone Superman, got taken out, like killed by that thing. I would have bought him becoming, a bit powerless and like being drained, but it kills him, and it's just, I don't know, it seems like too easy a way out, just to wrap up the film. But beyond that, it's a minor criticism. I still really enjoyed it.
I see that completely. I can actually agree with you on that, and we'll mount on that based on what the discussion that we're going to have right now, because one of the things in regards, well, not necessarily one, but there's three specific elements in regards to Superman Doomsday that pretty much paved the way for the future projects. And that is that all these films, at least up until a certain point in time, were not interlocking stories. These were all individual stories, which is one thing that sets them all apart. The other thing is the difference in animation styles, although in Superman Doomsday, it is the closest that we do get for a very, very long time to traditional Bruce Timm animation. I mean, I did appreciate the fact that they aged Superman in his face a little bit to make him look as if he has been doing this for many, many years. But at the same time, there's the little bit of change there. But also, which was the part that really did set me off, was the voice casting, that there is no one set actor or group of actors that will do these voices pretty much like they did in the series. Now, don't get me wrong, Andrea Romano is a genius. She is a fantastic voice director. She just, since the beginning working with Bruce Timm, has done wonders for giving these animated characters life. She really has. So we had Firefly's Adam Baldwin, we have Anne Heche, we have James Marsters, and they played Superman, Lois Lane, and Lex Luthor. What were your thoughts on each and every one of these people? And we could touch upon all of them at once, or one or the other, or whatnot, because, let me hear what your thoughts are in regards to these actors that they chose.
Well, the thing is, Andrea Romano has kind of been her own worst enemy because she casted and, well, basically got the voices for the original cast of the TV shows so spot on, so kind of iconic now, so perfectly cast that now it's really hard to hear other people do these characters. Like you hear, I mean, we'll talk about it when we get to it, which is like much further down the line. But DiMaggio's voice for the Joker in Under the Red Hood, I, I just, I can't accept it over Mark Hamill's because Mark Hamill just is the Joker. And like I say, that's just down to the work that Romano did in finding those actors, making sure they were on board and getting those performances from them. So that's kind of a long-winded way of saying I don't think any of the voice cast here are as good in these roles as the ones from the TV show. Now, that's just my personal preference, but again, that's because I've become so accustomed over 3 seasons to those actors, to Tim Daly and whatnot, and Clancy Brown and
Dana Delaney.
But yeah, Dana Delaney, that's the other one. So I love those in those cast. But I think they do a good job here. I think they do embody the characters. I think they do a pretty decent job. I buy the reasons they were cast. They seem suitable. Anne Hesh, yeah, she makes a strong Lois Lane. I think she does an all right job. Does pretty decent. But yeah, that's all I can say really. They don't blow me away, but they just work. They do work. But
absolutely, and that's pretty much what Andrea Romano said herself. It's just like she didn't feel that using the same actors would work in specific stories. And to some extent, I do agree because I feel that Adam Baldwin brought a little bit of an aged Superman, even though the guy physically ages 10 years slower than the rest of humanity. I mean, the guy brought a very, I guess, a much older, more, fatigued Superman to this version of Superman, and you can totally, and I totally buy it during the big battle with Doomsday. Like you can feel his pain as he's getting pummeled. You really can. And I feel that getting Anne Heche was a fantastic idea, especially with a specific moment where she's talking and practically breaking down in front of Martha Kent, and the lines that she brings, I don't think Dana Delaney could have done that, because Dana Delaney had her chance in the Justice League episode of Hereafter, which touched on the death of Superman to a certain extent, and I didn't buy it. Same thing with Clancy Brown as Lex Luthor in there. I just didn't feel that they brought the same intensity. Not that they're bad, they're excellent. But for
I think Dana Delaney actually got her chance in Batman: Mask of the Phantasm because she did the voice of
Andrea Beaumont. Yes.
Andrea Beaumont. And I think she does do a good job in that when she's talking about how they killed her dad, and she kind of goes off on one at Bruce. I just think, when you're doing a movie, I think you get a chance to up your game. I think you get probably more takes. I don't know. Some maybe it didn't work in the TV show. I can't honestly say the reasons why, but I think she certainly worked in Mask of the Phantasm.
I agree, 100%.
So yeah, I think she would have pulled it off personally in this film, but I do agree with you on that scene. I think that scene is very good. I think it's it's not what you'd expect to see in a cartoon, so to speak, in inverted commas. So yeah.
And I also really appreciated some other. I also thought that some of the side stories were really good, especially when it came to all of these different people that were coping with the loss of Superman. I personally was really a big fan of the whole story of Jimmy Olsen, who was voiced by Adam Weil, I believe it was, how he decides that he just needs to, for so many years, just like escape and just get away. And the way that he dealt with Superman's loss compared to how Lois compared with Superman's loss, compared to Perry's with Superman's loss. Perry started drinking. I found that very interesting to see, you know? But again, it shows you this movie was a staple and a really good starting point for where we were going to go, especially with all of these elements. And also, the score plays a big role in this story because it's not the Shirley Walker composing. It's something that definitely you can find elements in the Shirley Walker Superman the Animated Series score, but you get a little bit more of an aged and more mature. It's like you took the original score and you put it in a wine barrel and you aged it about 10, 15 years. It comes out with an amazing score from Robert Krall. I absolutely love the score of this film, and it really drives it. Every different scene, when it comes to the heartfelt moments or the real intense action sequences, they're two completely different sounds, but very, very powerful just the same.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think all the scores, to be honest, of the films we're going to talk about today are actually quite good. They're very cinematic. Again, not what you expect from this kind of animation. Certainly at the period that they came out anyway. I think these days it's definitely more accepted. But it's not my favourite score of the six. That's all I'll say. We'll get to my favourite one when we get to it, but it's not this one. I do think it is, as you say, though, it is a very good score, I think.
Right. Well, we're going to move on to the next one soon, but when we talked before we went on the air, you specifically wanted to rate each of these films. So what do you, I mean, my rating is 1 to 4 stars. So you could do your own if you want to do it out of 10, if you want to do it out of 5. What would you rate Superman Doomsday as a whole?
Yeah, I do it out of 5, and when this film first came out, I loved it because it was an action fest. If you're looking for an action movie in animated form, this is definitely a good place to start because you've got the huge fight scene with Doomsday, then you've got the huge fight scene between the two Supermans, and the animation on those fights is really good. It's really crisp. Some very well choreographed fight sequences, I think. Some character stuff in there works. Some of it not necessarily. But again, that comes down to the fact that they've got to cram so much stuff in there. I don't understand some of the stuff with Doomsday. There's a few mixed messages, I think, there, because like at one point we see through his vision, and it's almost like Terminator vision. It's like he's a robot, and you're like, have they made Doomsday a robot in this? Is he a robot? And it's never really made clear.
Yeah.
So I didn't get why they had to do that kind of vision. We could have seen him looking at that deer and just had red vision. We would have got it. Makes sense. So there's a few little things like that, and again the kryptonite thing, which just stop it from being what I would call a perfect film. Like I say, years ago I'd have given this a 5 out of 5 because it's one of them films you just sit there and enjoy the heck out of. But now I'm a bit older, a bit more critically aware, I think I'm going to give it a 3.5 out of 5.
And out of 4 stars, which is my rating, I would give it 3 out of 4. I love the film. It's a great movie, but I totally agree with you in every aspect where you find the faults and imperfections. I mean, I feel that, the whole thing with Doomsday, it's like in the first half hour of the film, all of a sudden he's gone. So like people say, then why is this movie called Superman Doomsday? So, but again, a very complex story in a 76-minute movie, actually, that takes a lot of work, but I agree. It's a good place to start. But now let's take a look at the second movie, and that, of course, is based on the famous Darwin Cook graphic novel from DC. Excuse me. And that is Justice League: The New Frontier. Now, I was very excited for this one because, the first Justice League movie to be rated PG-13, there's that sticker that says it right there on the DVD box cover. And knowing the preview that I got and seeing what the animation was going to look like, it was something that really, really excited me. A very interesting story with a great voice cast, which we'll get into later. But what were your first impressions when you first heard about it and saw it?
This is a funny one because this is almost like the reverse of Superman Doomsday, in that Superman Doomsday absolutely loved first time I saw it, and now some of the sheen has worn off. Whereas New Frontier, first time I saw it, I wasn't that enamored with it. I was like, yeah, it was good, but I don't know, it felt too crammed. I just didn't know who most of the characters were because I'm a big Batman fan, huge Batman fan, so I know all the Batman stuff and all the Batman references. But then when it came to like people like Colonel Flagg and people like that, they were nobodies to me. As far as I was concerned, Rick Flag could have just been somebody they made up for that movie. He didn't. Now he's in the Suicide Squad. The recent movie release. So he's clearly a character with a history in the comic books. So it didn't grab me that much, and I'm not that big on the golden age. It doesn't, because I wasn't a kid during that time. That wasn't my period of growing up with those comic books. So yeah, it left me feeling a little bit flat the first time around. However, seeing it recently, I absolutely loved this film. Like, totally changed. My opinion has just totally changed. And I think a lot of that is down to all these recent shows we've had, Arrow and The Flash and Legends of Tomorrow and all them lot, which, I've kind of stopped watching them for various reasons, which we discussed in private the other day. The thing is, what those shows have done and what these movies have done, the new movies that are coming out, is introduced me to these characters. So now coming back to this film, coming back and watching New Frontier, even the little characters in it, I get them. I get the fact that, oh yeah, that's a reference. There was just a few characters like Ray Palmer. There's one moment where Ray Palmer pops up and he's developed this technology to shrink and destroy the center, as it's called. Now, think of watching this film as a casual fan. Okay, you're a Batman fan. You come to this film, you're a Batman fan. You know Batman, but you don't know the wider DC world. So when someone like Ray Palmer just pops up in the film with the solution to the problem, with the method of killing this big enemy, to a person with that kind of knowledge, you're like, what a lame ending, what a lame kind of way out, so to speak. Who's Ray Palmer? I don't know who Ray Palmer is. He's not wearing a superhero costume. So based on this film, he's just some nerdy scientist that has appeared 2/3 of the way into the film. That makes no sense to me. So, so from that perspective, I think that's why I didn't like the film. So what I'm trying to say is this film absolutely, positively is definitely a film for comic book fans, people who are entrenched in the DC universe, who know all the characters. I think this movie is going to reward those people because obviously, like I say, knowing all those characters now, watching it the second time around, I absolutely loved it because I did get all those references.
Right. I completely see where you're going there, and I agree with you. This was, the sophomore film, and now we really see what Bruce Timm and company are trying to accomplish. Really make comic book films really geared towards the comic book fans. Like, I never read the Darwin Cook novel, but I would like to get to it someday, but right off the bat, I love this film, but for many different reasons. Like, it wasn't just because of the fact that I knew who Rick Flag and King Faraday, and, I knew that Ray Palmer is the Atom. Like, I knew that right off the bat because I know who the Atom is. But, you know, I also appreciated the story that this film told. It wasn't necessarily a movie. To me, it gave off a little bit of a Watchmen vibe. It was really to show the humanity of the superhero, and also to rope, if you also want to give a little bit credit to the Marvel Universe, the Mark Waid comic book series Marvels, superheroes from a human perspective. Because here are all these superheroes going from the golden age of comic books to the silver age of comic books, and that was the part that really drew me in. Seeing these heroes who had been around for a while suddenly being looked at as vigilantes and criminals and wanted men and women, to all of these new heroes that are suddenly emerging and being looked at as just complete sideshow freaks. But at the same time, not only do these heroes emerge, but they've got something to prove. They want to show the American people that we are on your side. We want to fight for you, for this country, because we are proud Americans, just like you. And, also roping in the whole story with the Martian Manhunter was a very interesting story, because it sort of was, I believe this is actually true, the Martian Manhunter coming to Earth is supposed to be America's fear of the unknown, and that's also the same thing with the Center. The Center is trying to destroy the human race because of the unknown. What is this creature going to be? And the superheroes are that final, I'm trying to think of the right words, like that line, here is where we've officially gotten to the furthest point in human development and human evolution with these evolved people, these evolved creatures. What are they going to do? Are they with us or are they against us? And that's what I feel was what made this film so strong as far as a story.
But I feel like I don't think you would get those story elements as strongly if you didn't have the love that you have for all these characters. I mean, you said it yourself before you were talking about the history of these characters. Well, to someone like, not the me now, but the me back then when I first watched it, who didn't know these characters, then you're watching a film in which there's Superman, and now he's disappeared, and we're following a story about some weirdo alien. What's this all about? This you sidetrack. Oh, Batman! Hello, Batman. Oh, right now he's got. So you know what I mean? It's like suddenly you start following all these characters that are kind of lesser known. That it kind of pulls you out of it, I think, as someone who doesn't know those characters. But like I say, that's all changed now. Thanks to TV shows like Arrow and The Flash, knowing who these characters are, knowing a bit of their history, a bit of their backstory, pulls you into this movie a lot better. So that when you're watching it, you can get engrossed in the overall story arc, but primarily because you're seeing these characters that you now know and love kind of interweaving in and out of each other's origin stories. Because they put Hal Jordan's origin story in here as Green Lantern. You get Martian Manhunter's origin story, and these would ordinarily be separate films within their own right. So to group them together like this in one film, it's only a 90-minute movie. It's a very interesting way of doing it, I think. But yeah.
And we got somebody in the comments section who's actually making some very valid points. He's basically saying that this film actually had an opposite effect, where it actually got people to want to know more about these characters. I mean, for me, there was one character in particular that I didn't even recognize from a hole in the wall, and that was Adam Strange, who makes a very small appearance at the very end of the movie. So I really wanted to know a lot about Adam Strange. And I also loved, because I think another major driving force alongside the story is the fact that they made it look exactly like the Darwin Cook graphic novel. The animation is phenomenal in this movie, and I also love that they really wanted to give a history lesson, if you will, to all of these characters as they were evolving. It's like, I love the fact that they put Superman in the Max Fleischer famous Superman uniform that you see in those old cartoons that were in the comic book as well. I loved how they evolved Batman through time, because we also have to remember that this does take place over the span of a decade. It goes from 1953 to 1963, which I also find very interesting. And I love how they show Batman in his original outfit, and then you see him wearing the uniform that, of course, was taken to greater extremes with the Adam West series and the Hanna-Barbera series, also having Robin by his side, etc., and really becoming a much more of a friendly, approachable hero, which is exactly what happened with Batman in the comics. There was a lot of controversy with his character in the beginning, saying that it was too dark for children. Let's lighten it up a little bit. And that was also the instituting of the comic book code in comic book history. So there's so many additional layers that people, while they may not know about them, can learn through this specific movie and just finding some more of this information through research. And then, of course, we've got the voice cast. We've got David Boreanaz as Green Lantern. We've got Jeremy Sisto as Batman, which I was a little bit uncomfortable with. That was a really interesting voice for Batman. But I thought Lucy Lawless as Wonder Woman was wonderful. Neil Patrick Harris as the Flash was my personal favorite.
I feel like Lucy Lawless is kind of a really obvious choice. Let's bring in Xena Warrior Princess to do Woman. It's not very far removed, but yeah, she is good as Wonder Woman.
Yeah, but I think that don't forget, we also have Brooke Shields as Carol Ferris. That's very interesting. But I think the one for me that really stood out, I mean, I think that the best voice in there for General was probably a tie between Neil Patrick Harris and David Boreanaz, but the one that I love the most is Kyle MacLachlan as Superman, because his voice reminds me of the Max Fleischer cartoons and maybe even the George Reeves series, like I just love that classic voice, because he sounds like the type of voice that would go to a whole bunch of kids and says, now remember, kids, always remember to cross the street and look both ways. Like you get that classic golden age Superman in Kyle MacLachlan's voice. That's one of my personal favorites in that movie. Even though he doesn't have a major role entirely, he's not in the movie as prominently as some of the other heroes.
Who was it who did Martian Manhunter? Because I thought his voice was quite good.
I'm quite certain that I believe it might be Phil Morris.
Right. Well, I thought he did a good job as Martian Manhunter. He had a lot of pathos about him, I thought. Yeah, voice cast on this is really good. It does feel very kind of classic 50s kind of matinee idol type voices, like when you listen to them. But yeah, I love the animation on this. It's just it does feel like a throwback to a bygone era, but it feels modern as well. It feels retro. It does work. I think that what was it I was going to say? While you were saying something popped in my head. Oh yeah, it was like you said. You pointed out that it started in 1953 and it finishes in 1963. I didn't actually notice that passage of time in that way. I didn't realize it had passed over those many years. And for me, that's one of the flaws, shall we say, of the film, is I think it could have done a better job, I feel, of showing that passage of time. But it like I say, I didn't notice it, so it doesn't really make much of a difference, I guess. Yeah, it's still a really great film. But the thing, like I say, this time around watching it, the thing for me that really stuck was just this story. This, it's a heavyweight story in which we're dealing with issues of communism, with the other, with the foreigner, with, like you say, this unknown alien, as it is. Are they with us? Are they against us? We're setting this during like the time of the communist witch hunts, and yeah, what better way than to use superheroes to kind of deal with those themes, and people having to live undercover. You look at this character of Martian Manhunter who literally has to disguise himself so that the world can't see him for who he really is, out of, not because he's a genuine threat, but because he knows people will fear him, because he's already seen one guy literally die of fright when he saw him. But yeah, just all those themes are just really well presented, I think, and a story really well told.
Okay, and before we continue, I did get in the comments, it was Miguel Jose Ferrer who voiced the Martian Manhunter. Just wanted to clear that up for all the fans out there. Okay. And also we have a powerful score by Kevin Manthei. I think that he really brought that classic style into the music, like making it feel very, it kind of, it kind of has, the sound reminds me of an old episode of Star Trek or Lost in Space. It brings that retro science fiction music sound to this score, which is very appropriate for this movie.
It's my favorite score of the six movies we're discussing. This and possibly Wonder Woman. I kind of tied for my favorite scores. I did love the score for this. I noticed it, but not in a bad way. It really accommodated the film well. And again, it's that tone. What a score should do is help set a tone, and this does it really well. It feels kind of like you mentioned the Fleischer cartoons. It feels like that kind of era. It takes you back there. Just hearing a few notes from it takes you into that world, into that time period. So yeah, really cracking score. I think the best of the six we're going to discuss.
Yeah, it's definitely one of my favorites. But if I'm going to rate this movie, I am probably going to give it a 3.5 out of 4, only because of the fact that it just is, to me, still not one of the most perfect, especially based on some of the things that we've discussed. There's a couple of very slight imperfections, not as heavy as some of the imperfections that we may have seen in Superman Doomsday, but it's something that a lot of people may not understand. It's not something that everybody might follow because, again, it's a very complex story with very familiar characters, and they're put into an environment and a story that is unlike anything that people have ever witnessed before. And that's the only reason why I feel that it's almost there. Like, they're getting better, but it's just not there yet. But still a fantastic and very well put together animated film.
Yeah, I think rating this as a casual viewer, so putting myself in the position of someone who doesn't know DC, I'd say this is probably a 3 out of 5. Rating it, for me personally, as someone who has now likes the DC universe, I would say I'm more of a DC man than I am a Marvel man. I'd give this a 4.5 out of 5. I think it's an absolutely cracking movie with some minor flaws.
All right, so now we'll get into the third movie, and I'm sure that you're going to be very excited to go into this one, but I've definitely got my piece to say on this one as well. We're going to be going with Batman Gotham Knight, which is probably one of the most unique films next to Justice League New Frontier for many reasons. I mean, this one is based on bridging the gap between the Christopher Nolan films Batman Begins and The Dark Knight. And probably the most interesting thing that the animators were most proud of was the fact that this movie was the very first time in history where Batman is portrayed through the magic of anime, Japanese animation. And of course, this was a very exciting movie as well because we get Kevin Conroy back as Batman. So, A Batman story that's animated, very intense, very dark, based on the developing story of one of the darkest and most brilliantly depicted versions of Batman. I would like the Batman fan, my good friend Brian, to start taking it from here.
Well, yeah, I actually really like this film. Surprise, surprise. But it, it is a problem in the sense that it's not really one feature-length film. It's kind of 6 short stories that go into making like a feature film. There is like threads that kind of tie them all together. So it's more that this exists within a particular world, and that world is the world that was created by Christopher Nolan. Because, like I say, this film bridges that gap between Batman Begins and The Dark Knight. So you as a viewer are free to kind of accept this film as part of Nolan's movies, as part of Nolan's trilogy. And if you don't want to do that, you are also free to say, no, it's a film on its own. It's got nothing to do with that. But, like, you get the characters of Ramirez popping up. Obviously, anyone who's seen The Dark Knight, you will know who Ramirez is in The Dark Knight. And then you get Crane's Scarecrow popping up, and he manages to get away from Batman, so Batman doesn't capture him. So we're still free there to have Scarecrow pop up at the beginning of The Dark Knight, and just see how kind of underground he's gone. Because he looks, obviously, if you've seen The Dark Knight, you see that he's a bit. He's not very crisp in that film. He looks like he's been living on the streets or under the sewers, in this case. So, yeah, there's definitely a lot of references, a lot of ties that keep this within Nolan's world, if you want to go down that route. Now, of the stories, of the 6 independent stories that are in here, I struggle to say which one is my favorite, but I kind of like. There's one called Working Through Pain, which is where
That's
Batman.
my favorite.
Yeah, I kind of like that one. It's where he goes and he's looking for someone to train him, basically, to help him deal with pain, to handle pain, so that basically when he becomes Batman, obviously he's going to get hit, he can get through it. It's not going to take him out. And he goes to this woman who, who helps him, who kind of helps him do that. And I like that storyline. I like that it shows us a lot about Bruce Wayne's psyche. The fact that, he's using this woman as a means to an end. He wants to become an instrument. He wants to become a tool. And they have different kind of perspectives on why one would want to deal with that pain. And obviously for her, for this woman who's training him, it's all about becoming a person of peace, so that, when someone attacks you, you can be that person who turns the other cheek, who offers the other cheek up to your attacker, so that you eventually kind of nullify their attack. Once someone realizes that they can punch and kick you and it's not going to get a rise out of you, they stop. And that's her theory anyway. That's like kind of the way of peace. Whereas Bruce, he's the total opposite of that. He wants to learn how to dull the pain so that he can attack, so he can go on the offensive, and take down as many criminals as possible. So yeah, I just like that exploration of peaceful means of stopping violence and the more aggressive means of stopping violence. Obviously, Bruce chooses his path, but yeah, it gets under the skin of Bruce Wayne, as do each of these in varying degrees. I think In Darkness Dwells as well. This is the one with Killer Croc and Scarecrow under the sewers. It's a bit bizarre seeing Killer Croc actually in this, because when they're asking us to buy that this is in Christopher Nolan's world, that's one of the elements that makes me think maybe
I
not.
thought that was a very bold move. I was actually very
I,
surprised that they put Killer Croc into this storyline as part of Nolan's world. I definitely will agree there.
yeah, definitely. It works within the realm of Batman that we know from the comic books, but it doesn't really work within the realm of Christopher Nolan's Batman. Um, but yeah, the animation in that one is a little bit too abstract for me. It's a little bit too garish. I'm not that keen on it. But I do like that it gets under the skin of Bruce Wayne. When he finds this pile of guns in the sewer at the end, and it's just like, wow, you realize the effect that has on him, and he just needs to get these off the street, so that that kind of rolls over into the story that comes afterwards. But yeah, animation wise, I'd say that's the weakest of the six. Although Field Test, I've got issues with, only because Bruce Wayne looks like he's about 21 years old in it. He looks like a teenage boy
Well,
almost.
you see, that's the thing. This is anime. Anime can make people look ageless. I mean, if you don't, you see, that's one of the few things that I will elaborate on, but I'd like you to continue with your thoughts before I jump in.
Again, like your point actually comes in quite handy, because I'm just about to talk about the first story in out of the six, which I think it was a very good way to start off with. And the first story is this Rashomon kind of tale in which these kids are telling their version of this event. They've all seen Batman, and when they tell their version of the event of having seen Batman, they each kind of visualize Batman in a different way. And I think it's very good starting with that story, because it feeds into this notion of having all these different short films in which we are seeing Batman in a different way through a different director's lens, and it shows how the character of Batman himself is very much open to interpretation. There is no one definitive Batman. There may be a definitive Batman for you, whether it's for you it's Frank Miller or Grant Morrison or whoever. But to say that there is a definitive Batman for everyone, you can't. As this film, I think, proves, because you see all these different interpretations, and that's what I like about the film. And it is one of the film's strengths as well as one of its weaknesses.
Where I will definitely say that I think that is the strongest point. I really feel that the animation styles, once again, I appreciate the movie for being as innovative as it was. Just using the actual anime style to bring these stories to life was definitely something bold, and definitely something that I felt that Bruce Timm was going to want to tackle somewhere down the pike because of how innovative he has been since he first jumped onto the scene. I'm not exactly sure, but I think that the animation on the first segment is actually one that was also used in the Animatrix, which I thought was very interesting. But that's actually the weakest one of them for me, only because of the fact that it just reminded me of that Batman animated series episode, which featured the Michael McKean Joker with the Silver Age Batman and the Dark Knight Returns. Like, that was just saw that before, heard that before, et cetera, et cetera. But I did think that it was cool to see a kid's perspective in Christopher Nolan's world, because we don't really have much of that in such a dark world. Field Test, I thought, was an interesting episode because it actually featured a very unique uniform that Batman used, and it just shows you that he was still working with Lucius Fox in regards to developing technology in terms of how he was going to fight the criminals. You can definitely see so many elements that link the story to the Christopher Nolan universe, because you also had we didn't mention these guys, but Maroni's in the movie and the Russians in the movie, and you could see that before the Joker united them, that there actually was a gang war. I love that they did what they did with Arkham Asylum, basically turning the Narrows into the entire asylum. I thought that whole thing with Archer and Ramirez was a great story. I absolutely loved it. Like I said, Working Through Pain was great. I also loved that they brought in Deadshot well alongside Killer Croc. I would have actually believed that Deadshot would have made a great Batman villain in Christopher Nolan's universe.
Yeah, I think Deadshot would be very much suited to Nolan's universe because he's a very grounded character. He's almost the flip side of the same coin to Batman, because he's essentially just a rich guy who has the kind of skills that Batman has, but uses them to take the easy route. Basically, he uses guns whereas Batman doesn't, and he kills whereas Batman doesn't. And it's just he's kind of like the opposite to Batman, but definitely would fit in Nolan's world.
Yeah, but I thought that was I do believe that entering Killer Croc into this was a very good thing to do because we also can't forget the fact that some of Batman's rogues gallery does come from the supernatural and the scientifically, genetically enhanced, etc., like Killer Croc and Man-Bat, etc. But the weakest part about these 6 stories, to me, is Kevin Conroy. I don't think he fits in this story at all. I think that using his voice was a very poor decision because when I watch these films, and I know Kevin Conroy, this is not for this world. I know for a solid fact that they begged Christian Bale to do the voice, and I think that he should have, or at least got someone with a deep voice to really, because something, I'm sorry, Kevin Conroy does not belong in Christopher Nolan's world. I don't think he does.
I don't feel either way about it certainly with regards to Kevin Conroy. For me, he does fit in this film. He doesn't stand out or anything as like I didn't hear his voice and think, oh, that doesn't work. To me, it was fine. I enjoyed hearing him, but I will admit, I'd have preferred having Christian Bale just because it would have definitely solidified this film as being part of Nolan's trilogy. And I think by not having Bale come in and do the voice, it kind of, it's just enough to make you think, actually, you can separate this from Nolan's trilogy and not really, I don't know, it lessens the impact. Whereas if you had the voices from the movies, it would really add to the mythology of Nolan's films for those who wanted it to. I do think Bale would have been a better choice.
Right. But anyway, and I feel that if I were to sum this movie up, for me, this is as innovative as it is from an animation standpoint. I personally think it's one of the weaker ones. I would probably give it a 2 out of 4 for myself because, I watched it very recently and, it's just, this one just really didn't suck me in. I have it because, I still feel that it is an important movie to have. I really feel that it does bridge the gap between the 2 Nolan films, to be honest with you. I really think it does because of all the characters that they use. But overall, I find such a smaller amount of appeal in it compared to some of the others that are in this library. That's just me.
Yeah, for me, I think I want to see a movie, I don't want to see a series of short stories. And I accept that there is a through line on these that kind of connects them. But again, I don't want to see short stories. I want to see one complete movie with a start, a middle, and an end. And for me, I had the same problem really with the Animatrix, is that, they're great. They're nice little films, but I want something bigger. It feels more complete that way. And I think that for me is the biggest sticking point. But watching this again, for in preparation for this discussion, I got to say I did enjoy it a lot more than previous viewings, and I think there is much to admire here, particularly the animation
Agreed.
style. Like say what you want about the originality of that opening storyline, because I think you're right. As soon as I saw it, I thought about that Batman animated series episode.
But the animation is amazing. The animation that is mind blowing. It's beautiful.
The animation is absolutely fantastic in it. Just so some of the
Very
movements of the
fluid, very
characters,
fluid.
very fluid. Like the most fluid of all of these six shots, I would say.
Yeah, especially
Um,
when Batman is depicted as the living shadow. You can't get more
oh,
amazing animation wise with that.
yeah,
That's
it's like
brilliant.
it's like ink. It's just like ink. So yeah, definitely much to admire. I would give it a 4 out of 5.
Okay. Well, now let's get into a movie that I know that you're very excited to talk about, and it couldn't be at a more appropriate time as yesterday the United Nations officially welcomed Wonder Woman into their group. And of course, we're going to talk about, to me, alongside you, I think probably one of the strongest movies in the library, and that is Wonder Woman, of course. And I mean, where do I start? I mean, first of all, I love the fact that they got Lauren Montgomery to direct this movie. I think that she really did a fantastic job of this film. And I think it was a movie that every DC fan was waiting for. I mean, everybody was so excited when Wonder Woman joined the Justice League animated series. That was great to finally see her there because she had never shown up in the Bruce Timm animated universe until then. And not only do we get a great Wonder Woman movie, we get a great and very well put together origin story. So, I can go on for hours, but I would like you to jump in right now and just let's get the conversation going here.
I'll say this right now. This is my favorite DC animated universe film. And I don't mean just of these six. I mean to date of all the ones we've had. And I don't group this in with Batman Mask of the Phantasm or Batman Return of the Joker. I still prefer them over this. But of the DC animated originals of this line of films, this is still my favorite because from start to finish, I can barely find anything wrong with it. I just think they nailed this character, absolutely nailed the character.
And the mythos.
And the mythology behind it is just spot on. It takes it takes what, quite frankly, should be a ridiculous concept in the same way that the Marvel movies took Thor, which is a ridiculous concept. How do you bring this down? It's one thing to take Batman, who's a down and dirty, gritty character, and bring him into a realistic kind of interpretation on film.
Correct.
You can believe that. Taking someone like Thor and making a film work on a character like that is an even greater feat, I think. But Wonder Woman is exactly the same. It shouldn't really work. It's one of those characters that you think, okay, on the comic book page, fine. But you put this to film, you're heading for a fall, basically. And what the film does, and what it does well, is it just embraces its comic book roots. It doesn't try and skip over anything that you might be embarrassed about by the character. It instead embraces them and acknowledges at times that some of these things that may actually be a bit weird, a bit hokey, a bit silly, and makes a joke out of them, gets humor out of them. The character of Steve Trevor in this film is amazing. I love the interpretation.
Fillion.
Yeah, Nathan Fillion. Yeah,
That man can do no wrong in my world.
He absolutely kills it in this role, but not just him as the actor, but the script. Some of the lines of dialogue he's given are absolutely fantastic as well. Some of the verbal sparring he has with Wonder Woman, because there's quite an antagonistic relationship going on between them to begin with. She's a bit of a man hater to start off with, but that's because she's been programmed that way. She's always been told that man's world is just full of sin, just full of depravity, and all men are pigs, essentially. So she's got that barrier to kind of get over, to this hurdle to kind of jump. But on the other side of that, yes, Steve Trevor is a man, and Wonder Woman is this super hot Amazonian woman. So he is going to have these kind of moments of lust, like when he tries to get her drunk.
Oh, don't even get
It's
me
a
started on
really,
how much I love that scene. That's one of my favorite scenes. And
it's a
just,
hilarious
yeah.
moment. And
And,
she's just like, she's not feeling the alcohol at all. And the amount of times that she slaps him during his film is hilarious.
oh, yeah.
There's one moment in the hospital. And again, it's played for laughs. You get these moments of seriousness and tension, which are broken with a joke. And there's moments where you kind of think, oh no, they're going down that route. But again, it's broken with a joke. So there's a moment in the hospital where he leans in for a kiss, and you're like, oh, they're going there too quick. The romance is going to develop too quick. But instantly, she slaps him. It's like boom. They turn it into a joke, and it's really funny and it's well timed. It's really well judged. And like you say, Lauren Montgomery deserves a heck of a lot of credit for this. I found that with these 6 films, her name appears on like 3 of the better ones in this out of these 6. When it comes to action, is what I mean. Not necessarily overall. I mean, obviously Wonder Woman is my favorite of the 6, but when it comes to action scenes, she seems really good at directing action, at choreographing the action. There's particularly the opening fight scene. There's this battle scene at the beginning of the film with all these Amazonians and God of War. What's his name?
Oh, Ares.
Ares. Yeah. So Ares' army is fighting with these Amazonians, and all the action in that is really well choreographed, really well animated. I mean, there's an action sequence later on in the film, kind of in the mid-section of the film. It's when Wonder Woman and Steve Trevor have their first battle with Ares. That's not animated particularly well, I don't think. It feels a bit rushed compared to a lot of the stuff in the film. But particularly that opening action sequence and this fight sequence that Wonder Woman has with this demon. It's just after Steve Trevor and Wonder Woman have gotten into a bit of a street fight with these thugs who try and rob them, and then this demon appears out of the fog, and Steve Trevor's like, "I'll take this one," but he doesn't realize it's a demon, and this big ass demon kind of comes out of the fog, and you realize he's in deep trouble, like. But that fight scene between Wonder Woman and that demon is so well animated, so well choreographed. It's a really great action scene, and not just in animation, but in movies as an action sequence. It's just a fantastic piece of action, really well animated.
Yeah, there's so much right with this film. I just love that they did this story and how well they did this story. I mean, they also got the animation is fantastic, especially when it comes to the action sequences. I mean, all the way from the opening action sequence all the way to the point where Wonder Woman is about to punch Cheetah in the face and it goes straight to black. I love I think the dialogue is great. I think that the characters play off each other so well. I mean, again, let's talk about those voices. I mean, we've got Kerry Russell as Wonder Woman. You got Nathan Fillion as Steve Trevor. You got Rosario Dawson as Artemis. You got Virginia Madsen as Hippolyta. The great Alfred Molina as Ares. I mean, and just as strongly as Nathan Fillion plays off Kerry Russell as Steve Trevor and Wonder Woman, he also plays off very well off Rosario Dawson as Artemis. Like, I love that scene when they're battling and stuff. Like she says, "Do that, and I will personally castrate you." Like, I just thought that was hilarious. And I also love the scene when they first introduce the lasso of truth. I think that they also use like adult language in great taste.
Yeah,
The word crap is taken to new heights in this movie, and it's done so beautifully and with great taste. That's what I like about it. It's like
when
it's hard.
when he's forced to tell the truth about what it means, and he goes, "It means excrement," and it's just so well played.
And then of course, and then not only is that a brilliant joke, but they top it with a better joke, and it's like, "Is there anything else you wish to tell us?" And he goes, "God, your daughter's got a nice rack." Like, I just was laughing my head off. But I also
There's
think
that
that
moment as well when they're in the plane. When they're in the plane and he doesn't realize that the lasso is tied around his foot, and he just starts splurging all this stuff out to her, giving it like telling her like his kind of psychology and stuff and why he is the way he is with women. And he's like, I don't know why I'm telling you this. And then he realizes that the lasso is just kind of wrapped around his foot, and he's like, oh man. Well, it's just it's just really well used, so well played. Like I say, the lasso it's one of those elements that it's a bit corny. It's a bit that's something from Linda Carter's day. Shouldn't really work, but it does. They make it work as they
there's
do
so
with
much
the Invisible
more.
Plane.
There's so much more with the lasso of truth. You do know that the
Mm.
guy who wrote the comics is the guy
Yeah,
who invented the
invented the lie
polygraph.
detector. Yes.
So there's
Yeah.
so much more to the lasso of truth. I mean, I personally love the lasso of truth, and I love
Mm.
how, even though you're absolutely right, you bring up the Linda Carter show and the campiness of the 1970s, but the lasso of truth has also evolved into the modern days, and they still give it a great practical use, which I think is
Yeah.
fantastic. And we also have another very powerful score, this one from Christopher Drake. I love the main theme of Wonder Woman in this film. And again, it's just like, I don't know how much more positive stuff I can say about this movie. I just think that there is just so much right with it. And what really happy is, and it really sends a very powerful message to today, because right now there is all of this battle going on in regards to feminism and equality with women and men. I mean, this thing has been going on since the 1960s, but it's been much more hyped up. And I think that this movie really not only shows that women can be strong and be whatever they want, but don't be upset if a man wants to help you and a man wants to fight alongside you and wants to protect you, It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
mean it doesn't mean that if a man wants to bring out his strength and his masculinity to protect someone that he cares about, because obviously there's a love story here. Steve Trevor develops a major love interest in Wonder Woman, and not, of the lustful kind, but truly, really cares for her. And the fact that she always pushes him away when he's just saying, listen, all I want to do is help you. We men are not bad guys. Not all of us are bad guys. Yeah, there's scumbags in this world. I hate to say it. There are. But you know what? We need a movie like Wonder Woman to show, that there is a truly great equality between men and women in terms of being powerful people and being powerful role models.
Yeah, it does a great job of, because that's the other risk that a film like Wonder Woman kind of runs, is that it just becomes a men hating session, a men bashing session. And what this film does very well is show both sides of the coin. Um, nothing really to add to what you just said. I just think the film does a good job of doing that.
And it's also got a great balance of intensity and lighthearted moments. Like
Mm.
you got those great big battles, but then you got that scene where she teaches the little girl how to fight with a pirate's wooden sword, which I think is absolutely adorable. I really like that. But anyway, yeah, if I'm
There's a
gonna
few,
rate
yeah,
one,
there's
yeah,
a few moments as well, like a few moments where people get kicked in the balls, and it's just like, it's just really funny. I just wanted to mention as well, just before we give our scores, Ares is a really great villain.
absolutely, because of how he manipulates the women.
Yeah, just like he's the power he has, both mentally and physically. He's a great match for Wonder Woman. He's a really great villain, and I like that they go with a male villain and don't just, because they could have gone with Cheetah. They could have said,
Or
oh,
they
it's
could have gone with Cersei.
yeah, and it's like, oh, because it's a female superhero, we've got to have a female villain. And it's like, I like that. Actually, no, we're going to address this right off the bat. This is a tale about the sexes, a war between the sexes, equality between the sexes, and all that. So let's have a male villain, and he's a good one. It's what's his face, Alfred Molina,
Yeah.
who plays Ares. She does a fantastic job. Really kind of understated vocal range throughout the film. It's just sinister kind of tone.
And because of that, I almost forgot. We also see that it's not just necessarily men that manipulate women, but men can also manipulate men, because we've got Oliver Platt voicing Hades and how he basically turns Ares into his own personal puppet. I found that at the very end to be a real stroke of genius. Like that's the real nail in the coffin. It basically means it doesn't matter whether you're a male or a female, there is going to be somebody that you're not going to trust. Someone is going to play you, no matter who you are or what you are.
And that's a really spooky moment as well when he sees his son. His son comes behind him and he realizes that his son has been made a slave of Hades. And it's just like, how twisted is that moment? It's just like a really kind of warped family, because they're all family, like,
Yeah, that's what I love about Greek mythology. Also, a Greek mythology fan appreciates this kind of movie as well. Yeah, it's a fantastic film, and I'm really surprised that they never continued this storyline. I really wanted to see more Wonder Woman films after this one, but this one gets the perfect score. This is a 4 out of 4. The more I watch it, the more I love it. Every single watch, I just love it even more.
Yeah, this is a 5 out of 5 for me. My wife has never seen any of the DC animated movies. If I was going to show her one, if she said to me, okay, show me a DC animated movie, let's see if you can get me hooked on them, this would be the one I would show her. I think there's something in this for everyone. I think it works for men and I think it works for women alike. So yeah, perfect. As far as these movies go, it's a perfect example of what they can do, and I give it a 5 out of 5.
All right, and then we get on to another hero with a sort of technical origin story, but we'll definitely get into those details. We get another Lauren Montgomery directed film, and that is Green Lantern's First Flight, coming out right around the time that the live-action Green Lantern film with Ryan Reynolds came out, but that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about this specific movie, and I feel that this one gets a lot of flack because coming off of Wonder Woman, like, where do you go from there? I personally feel that this is a very interesting take on the Green Lantern mythos, especially considering the fact that, yes, it's Hal Jordan becoming the first human Green Lantern, but the origin story only lasts for about 5 minutes. If you really, really think about it, it's more of Sinestro's origin story than Green Lantern's story.
Yeah, it gets straight into it.
Yeah, I love how they sort of really give it, like, it has a Training Day vibe, It's like Sinestro is Denzel Washington, the cop who's been on the beat, who's seen the true underbelly of the crimes of the galaxy, of the universe, and he also has a personal vendetta because of the fact that the ring that Hal Jordan wears was his best friend, Avin Sour's, and Hal Jordan is the straight arrow guy who is the Ethan Hawke, knows what he has to do, but doesn't like the fact that he's constantly getting judged because he's just trying to do the right thing. But that's been Hal Jordan's character. He's always been the straight arrow Green Lantern. We've had so many human Green Lanterns throughout comic book history, but Hal has always been the straight, narrow shooter. And I personally feel that this movie is good. It's got a very unique story. It definitely has some of the most unique characters that we've seen. I also like the fact that we see a lot of the Green Lantern Corps. Like, we see Tomar-Ray, we see Kilowog, of course, but we also see new ones like Boudica, and we see Chip, And also I think it's interesting because of the fact that Sinestro, is not just, the arch nemesis of Green Lantern. We now have seen him evolve as a villain in the comic books itself, especially thanks to Jeff Johns and Sinestro Corps War. Like, we now know that Sinestro has not always been evil. He's been good. He's been a Green Lantern. And I love the fact that it starts off in this story of him being a Green Lantern. I think that adds so much more, because I also like that it's no longer a good versus evil thing when it comes to superheroes and supervillains. I love that. You see that with Batman's rogues gallery all the time. There were people that were good that ended up going bad because of things that have happened in their lives. And I feel that it just gives so much more of a dimension to villains and even turns them into, dare I say it, likable characters.
Yeah, I mean, it's a film about ideologies, really, isn't it? It's a clash of ideologies. It's not so much that Sinestro wants to be a villain. It's just that he sees a different way of achieving essentially the same goals, but obviously the methods by which he's going to go about that can only lead down one path, and that's the dark path. I think this film, personally, I think this film is better than the live action one that they did.
Oh, I agree, 100%.
I enjoy the Ryan Reynolds film. I don't think
As
it's
do
quite as
I.
yeah, I don't think it's quite as bad as people make out. But I did watch it fairly recently after not seeing it for a long time, and it didn't hold up quite as well as I remember it. But the opening scenes in this film, and you mentioned it already, I think the opening scenes are so much more efficient in the way it sets up the story of Green Lantern. And I think that's because they're not going to get hung up on a love interest story. That's what I like about this film. There's no love interest. We have Carol at the beginning, but that's just there, I guess, as set up for future movies if they wanted to go down that road. But once he leaves Earth, after the first 10 minutes or so, that's it. We never go back there. There's no romance between Hal Jordan and anyone else during
Correct.
the rest of the film's running time, and that's quite refreshing actually, because every film these days has to have a love interest angle story, and that's just they don't have that here. So I really like that. There's a couple of criticisms, like the way the Guardians are with Sinestro is a little bit contradictory at times. Like, one minute they're praising him as one of the best that the Green Lantern Corps has to offer, and they show that they have this ultimate trust in him and stuff. And they do that by letting him be the one who trains Hal Jordan. He asks, he says, "Let me train Hal Jordan," and they say, yes, we agree that you are the man for the job. We trust in you and all that kind of stuff. And then in other scenes, they're pointing out how actually he's not so trustworthy. I like how recently he's been mouthing off a little bit against them, and maybe doing things that aren't by the book. Like they're calling him out on that. So for me, that's a bit of a niggle about the film, is that the Guardians 1 minute seem to be praising him, the next minute they don't. Make up your mind. It just seems to be for convenience sake. So when it's convenient in a plot for them to not be on his side, then they just decide that they're not, and vice versa. There's a few little moments, like they're not, they're nothing to really tear the film down with, but it's whenever you're dealing with a concept that's as high concept as Green Lantern, you're always going to find these moments where you think, oh, well, if I had the ring, I wouldn't be doing that. Like there's a moment where Hal Jordan ends up going down the sewers and he's trudging through all this waste. He's literally like paddling through all this waste. And like just moments before, we've seen him flying. He's used the ring to fly. Why is he trudging through this waste? He'd be using that ring to hover above all that crap and just kind of, fly that. Like I say, it's a minor shot. It's a little shot within the film. It's not something to really rip the film apart for, but it's just something where you feel like maybe a little bit more thought could have gone into a few of the scenes just to add a little bit more weight to him. And yeah, like there's a moment where I've written in my note, if you're going to make yourself invisible to evade detection, why would you be so careless in knocking the baggage handler over? And you know what I mean? It's like, so these bad guys, they're trying to go undetected from the Lantern Corps, they're invisible. Obviously, they want to go under the radar. So if you're trying to go under the radar, why are you causing such a scene? You know,
That's what
they
I'm trying to say.
literally,
Like, yeah, I mean, like if you see Cudge, he's really he's not the brightest crayon in the box. You'd expect the guy to make a stupid move like that.
yeah, like on the one hand, but I don't know, it's just a little niggle. And like I say, there's just enough of these kind of little niggles throughout the film where it's not enough to make me want to completely tear it down, but it is enough to say that actually, with a bit more thought, this could have been like a 4 out of 5 rather than the grade I'm going to give it. Um, but it's still a very entertaining film. For anyone who doesn't know Green Lantern, this is definitely a film to start with. Rather than the Ryan Reynolds one, start with this. I think you'll be much more rewarded from it. There's much better character development, I think, in this film than the live action one. And there's also much better action sequences. Again, Lauren Montgomery proving herself in the action states. I think she does some pretty decent action in this film, as she did with Wonder Woman. Not quite on the level of Wonder Woman, but again, that's because I just think overall the film isn't quite handled as well.
Well, yeah.
But yeah, I still definitely enjoy it. There's one there's a couple more things. Like there's some real badass moments, like when Boudica gets impaled on that
Yeah,
spike.
that was definitely an interesting thing.
Yeah,
Yeah, and broken hands and everything like that.
yeah. So it's just it's good to see that they're not afraid to go there. You
Yeah.
know, like we're getting like Killing Joke was the first R-rated one, but definitely there's still some pretty hard stuff as far as
It had some graphic
yeah,
moments. It really, really
yeah.
did. I mean, like, I also thought that probably one of the more intense parts is where I forgot her name. I think it was like Labia or something like Labia. I don't know. That's terrible. But anyway, where Sinestro's forcing her to get high off of that ball.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's
That was
very interesting because that's
yeah,
like drug addiction showing on a movie. You know what I mean?
yeah.
La
Oh,
Bella, that's her name.
La
La
Bella.
Bella.
I've got it written down here. I'm just looking at
Yeah,
my
I feel so
notes.
bad. I hope I didn't offend anybody with saying the word labia. I apologize profusely. That was not intended to stir a pot here, ladies and gentlemen. I apologize profusely.
I actually wrote a note down before and I passed it over because I didn't know what it was referring to. I just wrote Moonball Labella. And I read it before and I'm like, man, I can't even remember why I wrote that down. But yeah, that was the scene. It was quite
It was
when
very
it
eerie, very
starts
eerie.
off, yeah, it is quite eerie because when it starts off, you feel like she's a participant in this. You feel like he's offering her something that she actually wants in the way that you would, get some information out of a junkie. You give them a bit of their whatever feeds their habit, and they'll do anything for you. But then halfway through the scene, it turns a bit more sinister, and you realise that actually it's almost like you're pushing too much on the junkie. It's almost like you're taping the junkie's arm and you're sticking an overdose into them, and that's how
Well,
the scene
again,
plays.
that's the
Mm,
Training Day vibe that I get from that movie. I mean,
yeah.
my personal gripe with the film was I didn't really like.
So you're fading out, mate. You're fading out. I can't hear
Okay,
you.
okay, perfect. Okay, are we good?
Yeah,
All right,
we're
the
good.
fact that I faded out and it was up until this point was actually pretty miraculous. But anyway,
Mm.
yeah, what I was saying was the ending I didn't enjoy. The whole thing with the Green
No.
Lantern Corps against the Battery. By the time Sinestro gets a hold of the yellow element and basically brings the whole freaking Battery to go up against Oa, you just officially lose it. It's like the fight
Yeah.
just suddenly it just seemed to me so out of place.
It
So out
makes
of
no
place.
sense. It makes no
Agreed.
sense because we're told during this film, and we're told all the time in Green Lantern lore that yellow is the only color that Green Lanterns are kind of like powerless against and stuff. Yet we see, we see moments where that isn't necessarily true. There are moments where they are still able to do stuff against it. But I've got a note here where there's a moment where Hal Jordan is falling through space with no power. Like literally, he's used up all the power from his ring to defeat Sinestro, and then he starts falling to whatever planet it is. I think it's Oa, or one of the surrounding planets around Oa, and he's literally falling through space. And like, you're dead, mate. You know what I mean? You're dead at that moment. You've no longer got the ring giving you this protective force field. You're falling through space. So why aren't you dead right now? Now, I assume they're just trying to make out that he was within the gravity of that planet. Within the atmosphere is what I'm saying of that planet. But if that's the case, it wasn't animated very well, because from the look of it, he was still floating in space. So it's just, So there's a few things like that. Like just, we go from Wonder Woman, which feels like a lot of effort has gone into it, and I would imagine a lot of that is down to the fact that Lauren Montgomery is a woman. She is essentially the first person to bring the character of Wonder Woman and a female superhero to the screen in the form of a movie. So that must have been quite a heavy weight on her shoulders. The desire to get that right must have been quite well. It worked because she got it right. So I think sometimes that level of pressure forces you to get it right. And I think that maybe coming into this film, she probably didn't have as much pressure on her because, this is the character that, I don't think is going to have as much kind of, as many eyes on it as someone like Wonder Woman. It's not got as many factors kind of being accounted for. As say with a character like Wonder Woman. So I think maybe she relaxed a bit, maybe didn't quite put as much attention into this as she did with Wonder Woman, and it does show in a few parts. That being said, it is still a very enjoyable film. I think it's a very good origin movie. It's got some good action moments.
Absolutely.
And the things that are wrong with it are minor. It's just that there's quite a few of them. There's no one big thing where you go, whoa, that completely destroys the film. It's lost me because of that. There's just like a load of little trickle effects of minor things where it makes you go, it's not quite as good as it could have been, but it's still a very good film, I'd say.
Right. I mean, we've got some great voice actors in this. We've got, Christopher Maloney, who's a fan favorite amongst many people out there. He was Hal Jordan. We had Victor Garber, who is now on Legends of Tomorrow as Sinestro. I really appreciate. I can't look at him as Sinestro anymore because he is just so awesome as Professor Stein in Legends of Tomorrow. I really like him. But also we had Michael Madsen as Kilowog. I really didn't think the voice matched. I like that they got Henry Rollins in the next Green Lantern film, which we'll discuss another point in time. And we also had, I'm trying to think about the other people that we had in this film. We also had John Larroquette there as Tomar Ray, and we had Kurtwood Smith as Kanjar Rowe. I love Kurtwood Smith. He's one of my favorite character actors out there. He goes all the way back to Red Foreman on That 70s Show. That's him to me. He's great. But, it's good. It's got great moments. I think that there are some points in time where I think the animation is a little bit primitive, but also a very good score from Christopher Drake, especially the opening score. I like that as well. I would probably give this one, not the great. I would probably give it about 3 out of 4. Maybe a speck lower, 2.5, just because that ending really just throws me off.
I give this one a 3.5 out of 5. I pretty much summed up my feelings on it with my last comment.
All right, well, we are approaching the end, and we're going to be getting into one last film. And the reason why this one closes the first book on this DC animated film library is for one main reason and one reason only. And that, of course, is Superman, Batman, Public Enemies, based on the graphic novel that was done by Jeff Loeb. And why this movie was so great was because after all of these brand new storylines and all of these actors, we get Kevin Conroy, Tim Daly, and the great Clancy Brown back into the studio to become Superman, Batman, and Lex Luthor once again.
Yeah.
Right off the bat, I think that this is one of the most fun of the films, strictly because of its action. I think that the animation is probably one of the best, just because I love the whole, muscle upon muscle upon muscle. It's like, it just makes those action sequences all the more exciting. And not just that, all of the characters that you get in this movie, and there's just one rapid fire, one after the other, with a very simple to follow story. Basically, the worst thing happens. Lex Luthor becomes the president of the United States, and Superman is framed, and he puts out a $1 billion bounty, and basically heroes and villains are after Batman and Superman, because Batman is the only guy that believes him.
Right. Of the 6 films that we've looked at, this for me is the weakest.
It is very weak plot-wise. I agree.
I do think if you come into this without too much of a critical mind, then you're going to enjoy it. Like you say, it's a fun film. It's one where you kind of, you switch your brain off and you watch it. Because if you think about it too much, you start to see too many holes, too many flaws with it. I like the story up until the point that we get Toyman.
Yes. 100% agree with you.
This little kid, this kid who comes into it, and he's created this. It kind of worked better in the graphic novel version of it. It worked better on the page than it did on film. And it just seems to come out of nowhere. Like, oh, I know somebody. And then all of a sudden they're meeting with this kid who's already built this rocket. And you're just like, what? It comes out of the blue. It's not really very well fleshed out. It feels like they're kind of jumping the shark a little bit. I love Lex Luthor in this. Again, Clancy Brown is fantastic as Lex Luthor. I like that they bring the green suit, the Lex Luthor suit, into the animated world. But there's too many things with it. Again, a lot of little niggles, but more of them, I think, than I had with Green Lantern. But I never liked, even in the comic books, I never liked the whole storyline of Lex becoming president. I just don't buy it. I know that rich people can kind of buy their way into politics.
Hey, we're living that right now, just so you know.
We are. But I just don't buy this idea that someone like Lex Luthor, who's been behind so many plots to destroy the world and whatnot, I never bought it, and it still leaves a bit of a funky taste in the mouth. Sam Liu, who he'll go on to direct quite a few of these animated movies. I don't think that I don't like his choreography as much as Lauren Montgomery's with the fight scenes. I don't feel like they're as well done, but I do think there is still some really good action scenes here.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
There's the moment when when all of these villains show up, because Lex has put this bounty on Superman's head, and all these villains just show up and start battling him and Batman. Now, I love when Silver Banshee shows up, because
Yeah.
I don't really know much about her in the comics. I can't say I've ever read a story with her in the comics, but I love the look of Silver Banshee. I always have done. She's one of the most visually striking characters in the DC universe. Just like I've read her backstory, and it seems a little bit lame, to be honest, but the character's look is amazing. I've always loved it. And it's nice to see her in this film, and quite eerie as well when she first comes in and she just screams in Superman's face. But there's a moment when Mongol shows up.
Yeah, with Solomon Grundy.
And Solomon Grundy I can take, Mongol not so much. Now, Superman himself calls it out, or Batman does, one of the two. So they do address it. Like my thoughts were, why the hell would Mongol be here trying to claim this money, trying to claim this reward?
Oh, that's what.
But they call that out, like, one of them calls it out. But even so, even when you call that out, it still makes no sense that Mongol would be there, because he's not an earthbound character. He comes from another world. I don't think he would be in Lex's pocket. I don't think Lex would ever find himself in a situation where he could get him under his control.
But I have to refute you there, because he's not under Lex's control. He's under Grodd's control.
Oh yeah, sorry. Well, the same still.
But I will agree with you. It's like, how did Grodd manipulate this guy? Like, this is a cosmic being, a powerful character. How does a mind-controlling mutant gorilla get control of Mongol? And that's
like Grodd is earthbound, whereas Mongol is not generally on this planet. He tends to be in outer space. So
and that's what makes it funny, because that's my favorite part of the movie, especially because of the fact that you're absolutely right. Superman is trying to figure out why he's here. And then they find out why. And that also leads to my favorite part of the movie, when Grodd loses his control on Grundy, and Grundy goes, "Grundy no feel good," and then Batman goes, "Grundy gonna feel a lot worse." Like that's where I feel that Kevin Conroy is perfect for this role, because that is something that the Kevin Conroy Batman will say. That's just something that I love. And I also
his delivery on that is fantastic.
And I love that moment where Batman is encountering the 4 ice villains. I just think of that. Just seeing Captain Cold, Killer Frost, Icicle, and Mr. Freeze all in one room is just so cool to watch. Pardon the pun there. But also, I completely forgot, alongside Clancy Brown's performance, I love when he plays off of CCH Pounder, who reprises her role as Amanda Waller.
Yeah.
She
was always great in that role.
I love her.
Like I always knew her from X-Files. That's when I was first introduced to her as an actress. And she's always had a particular kind of, I don't know, Amanda Waller strength about her. So she was perfectly cast, I think. And I love the way that Amanda Waller in this isn't afraid to tell Lex how she sees it. She doesn't care that he's president. She just for the jugular. It's like, Lex, you're acting like an idiot. You shouldn't be doing this. You should be doing that. So yeah, and he appreciates the honesty. I don't buy that. I don't buy that he feels any kind of romantic feelings for her at all.
High on kryptonite in that point in time.
He is seriously high. Yeah, he's
ripped. He's ripped beyond repair at that point in time.
Yeah. He's like Bane at that point. It's just
pretty much.
Yeah.
He's completely roasted on kryptonite, so it makes perfect sense that he's going to get crazy and loopy.
It's the only possible explanation at this point for why.
But yeah, I feel that those are the weaknesses of this film, because while you get some great moments, particularly in the action sequences, I mean, like, it all starts with the battle with Metallo. And even those moments, I mean, like I never knew who Major Force was. I thought that was a pretty cool thing to see, especially considering the fact that I did not even know that he was a villain. Also, some people could say that the animation could be a little bit crazy, especially because it's based on the illustrations. Because especially my wife did not like the way that Power Girl was drawn. She basically said her boobs were too big.
No, mate, look, where have I put it? Where have I put it? Basically, that was one of my comments. I've literally written it. I can't find where I've written it, but I've written it down. Power Girl, Power Girl. There we go. Yeah, I just put Power Girl's boob size is ridiculous. That's literally what I wrote. I thought, and especially when you put it in conjunction with her waist. So she has this waist that is like that, and then these boobs that it annoys me. In this day and age, we should be having female superhero characters that are drawn appropriately. I feel
Right.
it's just
because there were so many other female super villains in this movie, like Shiva and Nightshade and even Killer Frost. They did not have the sizes. Not even Starfire, who has a non-speaking role. She doesn't even have okay, I'll be a little offensive here. She doesn't have a rack size like Power Girls.
Yeah, it does bother me, to be honest, because like, you know, I've got a daughter, and I don't want to get too political here, but I don't want to bring my daughter up in a world where she thinks that actually she has to hold to some kind of ridiculous ideal of what a woman is. You know, an impossible ideal to attain. She shouldn't have to grow up with that in her head. You know what I mean? And I want to be able to sit down with her at some point in the future and watch these films, these superhero films with my little girl. But I don't want her to think that that is something to attain, that you, in order to be a woman, you have to look, you know, ridiculous like that. The way these you know, it's basically a stupid male fantasy that has been drawn on the screen. Anyway, banged
No
on about that
problem.
for long
I
enough.
appreciate the fact that you said that. But yeah, I feel that there are a lot more faults. I feel that the whole thing, like we said about Waller and Lex Luthor, that's just something completely strange. And the whole thing with Toyman and his gigantic robot, that just comes out of nowhere, even though Toyman is very, not mentioned by name, but mentioned by Amanda Waller when they see that this meteorite is coming to destroy all of humanity. And I kind of feel that the dialogue was written very poorly. Like, the line, "you want to play it that way," is milked beyond repair. I think that thing is that line is used like 3 times in the movie in general. And also, I think that the whole battle with Hawkman and Captain Marvel is just, I still am trying to figure out where that fits.
Yeah, it comes out of
that.
nowhere. It's just literally, you could skip that scene and it wouldn't change the narrative at all. So it doesn't add anything to character. It doesn't add anything to the plot. It's just there as an action scene for the sake of having action scene. And that's kind of how I feel about much of this film. I mean,
I think that's what it is.
that scene in which, you know, we have all of these villains, you know, they're all being mind controlled. But that scene, one of the things that annoys me about it is that they go for such big league villains. Because like when you have a story like you know, you have a Batman story in which Bane is the villain, you know, you're going to have a few pages taken up of a fight scene between them two, because that's just the kind of league physically that Bane is. He's Batman's most physically fearsome foe, and he gets taken out like that in this film. He gets taken out way too easily, and that's because of this, you know, trying to cram all these different villains in. Just it's pandering to kind of fanboyism in a way, because yeah, it's cool to see all these different characters in one scene.
Absolutely.
But it doesn't make sense. It makes no sense when you've got, you know, Batman's most physically powerful foe, Bane. He's there. He's amongst them.
Yeah,
and
it's weird.
they have to take him out really quickly in order to get to the other characters. Well, it's just not realistic. Bane
And,
would
and
not be
and
taken
Bane's
out.
not even the kind of villain that would specifically want to get a job done for the sake of having money. He's not that kind of villain.
No, not at all.
Villains
I mean,
like Cheetah and Black Manta, maybe, but not Bane. Not Bane.
well, actually, I will half refute that because he did kind of go that way after, like, after Vengeance of Bane 2 and the stuff that he did with Ra's al Ghul. He did become a bit of a mercenary for a while, and then then he joined the Suicide Squad. So that there is that in there, but I don't. It's just not played very well. Just to see him pop up like that, it feels like, yeah, we're going to stick this in there for the fanboys. But as a result, you do that character a disservice because Bane's an event character. He should be in a major plot line. He shouldn't be just thrown in for the sake of it, and that kind of annoys me.
Well, anyway, I mean, we're reaching the 2 hour mark now, and if I'm going to rate this one, I mean, on the fun factor, it's a perfect score, but as a movie itself, as you said, I would agree that it's one of the weaker ones, but because of the fact that you just have so much fun with it, I will be a little bit more gracious and probably give it a 2 out of 4. I really don't think I should go any lower than that, just because when I watch it, I just have so much fun with it. And as long as there is a fun factor in a movie, that's a very, very big positive for any movie, no matter what way you look at it.
Yeah, I give this one a 3 out of 5. It's only just a 3. But that's me talking from a critical standpoint. But like you say, I do think there's a lot of fun to be had from this film. I like seeing Metallo. I like that fight scene. There's some good action stuff. There's some good
Absolutely.
action towards the end with Lex. So it is an enjoyable romp, but that's all it is.
Yeah, I agree.
If you look at something like New Frontier, that's got so much meat on its bones, this looks really bare compared to that.
And sometimes you just need to have one of these carefree movies, you know? Sometimes you just have to have one of those fun, hit 'em up superhero movies, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Alrighty, well, guess what, everybody? That concludes our first of hopefully many live shows of reviewing all of these DCU animated films. Brian, I just want to say thank you very much for joining me tonight. I had so much fun talking about these movies with you, and these discussions are only going to get better. And I think what we're going to do, I just want to put out a couple of hints. We're probably going to be coming back with a second part around the time that they announced the release of Justice League Dark, which is the next film in the DC library. We won't be reviewing it, but that would be a good time to come back. So I want everybody to please put your comments in the box below. Please speak your mind if you want to have another discussion or a deeper discussion on any of these movies. If you haven't seen some of these, we're sorry if we gave some points away, but this is a real discussion show. And these are all fantastic and fun movies to watch, especially if you enjoy superhero movies. And as we go on, some of these, I'm just letting you guys all know this right now. There are some of these that will put some of the Marvel movies to shame, in my opinion. But please follow myself. Please follow Brian as well on his YouTube page. Follow us both on Twitter. I will put all of the links below as soon as this video is officially fully edited with a proper intro and outro screen. And also, and this is the last message, we would love to have more people on the panel. We will probably want to go with 3, but if we were able to get a maximum of 4, that's it, a maximum of 4. We actually were supposed to have a panel of 3 today, but unfortunately our other friend couldn't make it. We'd love more perspective, we'd love more comments, and we'd love more insight. So if you feel that you have something to bring to the table and you would like to join us on one of these future live shows, contact myself on Twitter via direct message. You could do the same for Brian. And let's have a chat. Let's talk a little bit and let's see what we can do. Before we go, Brian, is there anything that you want to say?
Not really. Just yeah, like I say, out of these films, Wonder Woman was definitely the standout from today's show. But I look forward to discussing the next batch.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to discussing book 2. It's actually going to be a smaller book, but there's a lot to say. in regards to these. So everybody, thank you very much for watching as always, and we will hopefully see you in the next one. And actions speak louder than words. Take care, everybody. Have a great night.
See ya.